Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about something that I've noticed it's lost on a lot of people. It's lost on a lot of people. And that is the fact that when we're dealing with big multi-joint exercises, that we gain very large amounts of muscle from work sets that aren't really to failure, that aren't even close to failure. And this is a point that I think a lot of people miss, both they observe in the real world and the scientific literature. You'll probably notice that, a lot of lifters who do big movements, as long as they get sufficient volume, they tend to get pretty big. Again, as long as volume is present, in quality sets and quality reps on big movements, they gain a lot of size. All the literature shows, by the way, that single joint exercises don't cause more muscle growth than multi-joint, right? In the primary mover, sometimes some of the heads get worked better. For example, maybe the long head of the tricep doesn't get worked very well on the bench, but the lateral head does. So, but the overall tricep growth isn't superior for the tricep extension versus the bench. It just happens to be where it is in the tricep. But if you kind of start looking at this and you start looking at splash over and you look at the fact that we know, like even with the effective rep theory, which has never been demonstrated, there are exercise scientists who disregard it. But even with effective rep theory, which doesn't seem to fully apply to advanced lifters, it's a little more towards more novice lifters, that any set that gets within 5 reps of failure causes significant hypertrophy. Now let that one sink in for a moment. So does that mean if you're doing sets of 5 with your 8 or 9 rep max that you're gaining muscle from them? Yes, absolutely. Does that mean that if you're doing sets of 10 with a weight that you could do for 14 reps on your first set, you're gaining muscle? Yeah. And because the fatigue is accumulating, guess what? You're actually getting closer to failure with every set, even though the reps are the same. And when you look at the way a lot of big multi-joint movements work, and what do I mean by that? Squats, bench press, deadlift, chin-ups, pull-ups, overhead pressing, rows, bench pressing, and variations in them. I mean, even a leg press, a belt squat machine. Those are still very big multi-joint exercises. A lot of muscles are being worked. And when we start doing multiple variations of some of these things, the focus shifts. In other words, people will say something like, well, the whole lower body doesn't get effectively work on maximally on either the squat or the deadlift. Well, what happens if you combine them? What if you do both? Well, now it does. What happens if you throw in another big multi-joint movement into the lower body to address your weak links? Because I do plenty of stuff like that. I do belt squats, I do glute ham raises, good mornings, all those things. What happens? Well, now we are working everything. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do extra work for our weak points, and I want people to understand when I say this, I'm not saying avoid training your weak points. I'm not saying single joint exercises don't even have their place in there, because they clearly can have a place there. What I'm saying is that people discount this, so when they'll see programming and they'll see someone doing like the sort of concurrent programming I give people, they're like, well, that's some 3 ramp-up sets there, 2 ramp-up sets. They're not that challenging. It's like, well, for a novice lifter, they may not stimulate growth the first 1 or 2. For an advanced lifter, they will. There is a training response to that, and because we have higher neural drive and higher neuromuscular efficiency, okay, we'll gain muscle from those. And they'll say, well, that's one really hard set, and then you're doing a bunch of volume back-off work that's, several reps, at least 3 reps from failure. Yeah, other than you've attenuated the upper threshold fibers already, they're fatigued. So you're walking into that volume work in a fatigued state. Well, how does volume? I mean, everyone will look at that. Well, the people out there admit, oh yeah, high reps are good for building muscle. Rep work is great for building muscle. But why? Why? Because it creates metabolic fatigue. Okay, we have two real pathways that we know that facilitate muscle growth: mechanical tension and metabolic fatigue. Arguably, the metabolic tension or the mechanical tension increases even with a lighter weight as fatigue sets in, hypothetically. But what if you've already done some heavy work? You've created large amounts of mechanical stress. And then you use metabolic fatigue to induce further hypertrophy. It doesn't have to be to failure. So people will see that and be like, well, these people are doing all these sets of 10 at 50% or sets of 5 at 70%. That's pretty far from failure. It's like, but it's been done after heavy work. Okay, it's been done after heavy work. We're fatigued already. It's closer to failure than you think it is. In fact, some of those sets, when I prescribe that for people, some lifters who aren't in shape, they don't have good conditioning, they can't even finish the 5th set. I see it all the time. They're not in good shape. They can't even finish the 5th set sometimes with this weight that people think is too light. But the point is, they all grow, they all get bigger, they all get stronger. And it's because we're spending a lot of time doing big basic movements where we're combining large amounts of metabolic fatigue with mechanical tension. You know what? And by keeping everything away from failure, we're getting these overlapping benefits usually, but we're not getting beat into the ground. And that's the thing that people forget. They're looking at, oh, you need to be working this hard. But they're thinking of these little single joint exercises that aren't that fatiguing. When you start doing this with multiple sets of deadlifts, multiple sets of squats, it's a different ball game. Hey, you're inducing a lot of fatigue. And if you start trying to take these sets to failure, all you do is beat up your recovery. And it's not necessary. You can get jacked and strong without doing so. In fact, people have noticed with me, I mean, when I've hit some of my highest strengths ever, you see me doing nothing but singles, followed by rep work. And people look at my legs. I mean, granted, I don't have the best arms due to genetics and other things and structure. My legs, my back. Come on, guys. You know how I built all of that. You've watched me do it for years on camera. It's all there. You see my clients do it all the time. I've had tons of clients where we do their training vlogs. Some of them you guys have watched for months make progress over time. So, people will come in and they'll argue about these things, but it's like, but there's your evidence. Best coaches in the world tell you it works. I tell you it works. You watch it work with my clients. End of discussion. All right, guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.